Today is November 14th in the year 2003. I'm Karen Herman with the Archive of American Television, and it is my great pleasure to be interviewing Dr. Robert Schuller at his offices at the Crystal Cathedral Gardens in California. Dr. Schuller, I'd like to start right from the beginning, and that is, what was your name at birth?
My name at birth was Robert Harold Schuller, and my grandmother wanted the name Robert. My mother wanted the name Harold, or vice versa, so I went by both names. Grandma called me Robert, my mother called me Harold.
Did you have any nicknames growing up?
No, I didn't.
None?
No, I never did.
When were you born?
When was I born? I was born September 16, 1926, in a horrific flood. And the doctor made house calls, and he made it through the storm, delivered me safely.
Where did you grow up?
In northwest Iowa, on a little farm. I tell people I was born in a little house at the dead end of a dirt road that had no name and no number. And you can go anywhere from nowhere.
What was your father's name?
Anthony.
What did he do?
He was a farmer. Mm-hmm.
And your mother?
She was the farmer's wife. She was the homemaker, and a very powerful influence in my life.
What was her name?
Her name was Jenny Beltman.
Did you have any sisters or brothers?
Yes, one brother, Henry, 3 sisters.
Talk a little bit about your family's religious life.
Well, we were part of a Dutch colony in Sioux County, northwest Iowa, and the entire county was made up of Dutch people. And so I got the impression the whole world was the world I knew. People all went to church on Sunday. Children, if you were Protestant, all went to Sunday school. And everybody lived by the Ten Commandments. To break the Ten Commandments would be like breaking a civil law today and probably going to prison for life, you know. And everybody respected the name Jesus Christ. And it was a very strong, positive influence.
What were your interests growing up?
Oh, my interests. Talking. Talking to people. And my brother used to say, I hope you never become a farmer because you'll fail. You better make money talking or you'll never amount to anything. I had one hobby, that was fishing in the stream that went through our farm. I was the last of the children, 8 years between me and the youngest. So I really grew up in a solitude. And I liked it. I liked to go to the river and fish, watch the clouds through the sky. I fell in love with the sky, I think, then and there. And I've been in love with the sky ever since.
Did you have any idea what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yes, I was a month short of my 5th birthday when my mother's brother, who was a missionary to China, he went to Princeton, graduated, went to China. While he was there, he heard that his sister, 2 years older, was pregnant again, and she was at an age where everybody thought she had her children, 4 in number. So everybody was a little concerned about her pregnancy. So I would find out later he prayed for his sister a lot, fearful for her and for the child that she would bring. I was born. When he came home on a furlough 5 years later, he would see me for the first time. He ruffled my hair and said, "So you're Robert, are you? Well, you're going to be a preacher when you grow up." I just came back from China, and I love China because I really feel my calling started there. It was there that a man, my mother's brother, got the vision that this unexpected child was special, and it was God's plan. And he should be a minister.
And what did you think when he said that to you?
Oh, I thought, oh, fine. I didn't have any problem with it. He was a hero in our home. To have somebody from an Iowa farm home that would go through Princeton, prestigious university and seminary, and then go to China. He was a hero, like military people are heroes. So it was fine. So that night I added to my little prayer, "May you preacher when I grow up." I think I prayed it every night for 20 years. He said the next morning, he stayed at the house, and he said, "Well, you're going to be a preacher. That'll take you 20 years. I said, "That's fine." I had no plans. I wasn't thinking ahead. And I think, and I look back on it, that was very, very important because at a tender age, I set a 20-year goal. So I've never been afraid of setting long goals. Then when I finally graduated from college and seminary, and I had a goal to build a kind of a church that would really impact the world. And boy, I thought 40 years, I'll bet I could do it. So I came out here with a 40-year goal. I don't think I'd have thought in 40 years. First goal was finished, 20 years, I'll double it, make it to 40.
Where did you go to school?
I went to first 8 grades. I went to a country school. It was a one-room building with outhouses, no running water. 17 students from 1st through 8th grade. And the first Christmas at my first grade, the teacher said, somebody has to do a Christmas poem for Christmas. Who wants to do it? And I raised my hand. I said, I'm going to be a preacher, so I have to do that. And I did. I was really focused it's a really amazing thing when I hear myself say it, focused from the age of 5. This is very rare. Excuse me. Then I went to a high school that had 72 students, Newkirk High School. Then I went to Hope College in Holland, Michigan. It was a very good college. It was at its roots with the Reformed Church, which is my denomination. We are the oldest denomination in the United States. Started in Manhattan in 1628 when we bought the island. We were the founders of a college called Queens, which later changed its name to Rutgers. So the Dutch people were very, very committed to high education. And then Hope College was in Holland, Michigan. It was at the time, and still is, one of the great private colleges in the United States. I went there for liberal arts, and but it was my introduction to psychology there that would make a life-changing impact on my life. And so that's where I went to college.
Now, what about psychology made that impact?
Well, because I was going to be a preacher when I grew up. Suddenly I'm taking a course that I can relate to. Most of the courses I took at college, I had to take them to get the degree. And many of those courses, of course, are prescribed by the accrediting universities. You have to have 8 hours of science. Oh, no, it's 8 hours of science. So I had to take biology. Like it or not, I hated the smell of formaldehyde. I passed probably with a D. I didn't care about it. I didn't want it. I didn't like it. But I had to have science to get a Bachelor of Arts degree. I had to take mathematics. I didn't like math. I didn't know math. I never had geometry in the little high school. The professor gave me a passing grade because he knew I was going to be a minister. And of course, it's like that I couldn't relate to. But when I got psychology, now that's something else. The first textbook was Human Dynamics the Dynamics of Human Adjustment, I think was the title. It was eye-opening. It explained the human being. And that's what I'm interested in. Being a preacher to me is helping human beings. I'm in the business of helping human beings at the deepest level. Not a doctor just dealing with a heart or a liver. I'm dealing with a whole person. So I would continue that study all through my life. That's why I became a friend of Viktor Frankl, who's many would say was the greatest psychiatrist of the 20th century.
What's the most important thing that you learned from him?
Oh, I think it was his whole concept of logotherapy, the will to meaning. He sat in the corner of this third floor one time for 3 hours, this very floor, at the sofa I'm looking at. And I'd said to him 2 years before, give me a summary of psychology. He said, well, to Adler it's will to power, to Freud it's will to pleasure, to Adler it's will to power, to me it's will to meaning. And that's the ultimate core. And I said, why meaning? He said, I don't know, but that's where it's at. And 2 years later, we sat for 3 hours here, and I said, have you found out the answer to why meaning is so important? He said, no. I said, I have. Which probably might have come across as impertinence, but it was spontaneous because I knew it. He said, what is it? Meaning, I said, you survived Auschwitz. You survived the death camp because you put some meaning into your experience. That's what you say. What did it do for you? Why was it all important? Because as long as there's some meaning, you still have a vestige of dignity left. And the dignity is even deeper than meaning. And so I think I was probably one of the first people, maybe the first, I don't know, but I was surely at the cutting edge of the self-esteem movement when I wrote a Self-Esteem, the New Reformation, where I said this is the ultimate human value.
Going back to your education, what about communications? How did that figure in?
Well, communications, I think the best thing that happened to me there is, first of all, I had one of the great speech teachers in the United States, and he was so known. I was very fortunate. At that time, I thought I was a great speaker because I'd done a lot of talking. I mean, I was out talking to youth groups even while I was in high school. I thought it was great. And I knew he'd brag about my speech when I had to give my speech to the class. In Speech 101, I got ripped. I didn't know. Thank God I would learn it. He said, Schuller, I think we can make a speaker out of you, but it's going to take a tough lot of work. He said, we got to get rid of a preek tone, and that's a tough thing to get rid of. Preek is a Dutch word, and I'm Dutch, and he was too. Preek means preach. He said, we got to get rid of that preaching tone. It was the thing. Preaching tone, let me illustrate. Let's talk today about how we can live the life that God wants us to live. This is very important. Preek tone, preaching tone. He said, it's got to be conversational. Talk to people. Don't preach at them. He cured me pretty good. I still have remnants of that left at my worst. And I think then the most important thing that happened was it was in that department that I involved myself in debate. And the only honor I ever got at Hope College was being elected to Phi Kappa Delta, the National Honorary Forensic Fraternity. I'm very proud of my gold key, and I learned debate. And I was good at debate. And I think I've been a debater ever since. I think that when I get up in the pulpit to speak, I'm always anticipating the audience. I'm anticipating their rebuttals, their disagreements with me. And I use anticipatory rebuttal very effectively in my delivery, and makes me a more effective persuader, communicator. So,
Did you listen to the radio?
oh, barely, for a short time. Short time. Here, I was on a radio, maybe for a few years.
But going back to when you were in seminary,
Oh,
about
I recall that
communication.
when I was still in college, I was working in radio as a radio announcer for our national religious program.
And how did you make your way to California?
Well, in the college, I've never been into athletics. I'm into drama and music. And I was a member of the Hope College Male Quartet, singing low bass. And we were very good. And we got the idea of taking a tour as a concert tour promoting the college. The president bought into it, so we spent a summer touring from Michigan all the way to California. And I saw mountains for the first time. Wow. And here I saw palm trees and oranges and trees and the beach and the sun. This is where I want to live. And when I got out of seminary, one of the senior ministers who was my mentor moved to California and was responsible for my getting a call to come here and start a new church from scratch. No committees, just my wife and I.
And how did you make that happen?
Well, I just decided that I would find a hall and ring doorbells door to door and invite people to come to a new church. And I could drop a good name at that time. That was one thing I had going for me. My denomination is one of the smallest in America, and the oldest and smallest. That was not impressive. But the pastor of our oldest church was a household word. His name was Norman Vincent Peale. So I could say, well, if you don't go to church, ours is the Church of Norman Vincent Peale. His book had been for 2 years on the number one in the New York Times bestseller list. So that was this, and he wrote a letter to introduce me so I could pass that on.
Now talk about the concept of the drive-in church. How did that come about?
Well, then I came here, and I, before I arrived in town, I was told by a denominational leader that there were no empty halls. Garden Grove was starting to explode as a suburb, and you couldn't find an empty hall. Impossible. And driving out here, I remember in a cafe in Albuquerque, New Mexico, thinking about impossible, that's ridiculous. Suddenly that word sounded a very ignorant word, a very unstudied word, a very irresponsible word, a word based on pure assumptions. And I wrote impossible, question mark, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm sitting here in Albuquerque. I can give you 10 places where I could probably have it. Don't tell me it's impossible. Number 1, rent a school building. They're closed on Sundays. 2, rent a mortuary chapel. They don't have funerals on Sunday morning, I don't think. 3, rent a Seventh-day Adventist church. 4, rent a Jewish synagogue. 5, Knights of Columbus Hall. 6, 7, 8, 9 was rent a drive-in theater. I'll talk on the rooftop, talk to people in the cars, but don't tell me it's impossible. Number 10 is rent an acre of ground, rent a tent, and rent some chairs and hand out flyers and say, hey, come here, I got something for you. That's how it started. Every possibility struck out until I got to number 9, went to the drive-in theater. He said, yes. The rest is history.
And talk about how did you preach there?
How did I preach there? Well, I would wear my garb, which in our denomination would be a robe, an academic robe, and walk up a ladder to the rooftop and just talk into the microphone, looking through windshields at people in their cars.
Could you see the people in their cars?
Oh yes, yes. It had the novelty of being newsworthy. So I made news because it's a freaky thing to do.
Did you use movie imagery at all since you were in a theater?
Movie imagery?
Yeah, I mean, did that
no,
play
I
into
don't
it
think
at all?
I did. I don't think I did. But it was interesting because it was a success, because the secret of success, I've often said, is to find a need and fill it, find a hurt and heal it, find a problem and solve it, find a division and build a bridge. And that's the psychological secret of success. So I didn't know it, but people needed a drive-in. A very wealthy woman of this community had a son who was mentally retarded. She couldn't take him to church. She put that boy in her expensive car and went to the drive-in. And even John Wayne would come there, not often, but once or twice. Nobody would ask for autographs. He lived here in this area. So it worked.
Do you remember the first time that you saw television?
Yes, I think I do. I remember the time that I bought my first television set. It was 3 years before I came here, 1952, I think.
And did you see the power of television at that time for you?
No, I don't think I did. Not at that time, no.
And how did that come about? How did you go to television?
Well, here in California, this is 1955, television was pretty powerful, and I could see it as a vehicle of communication, but I hadn't really thought I could do it, never gave it a second thought. But I was the vice chairman of a committee that brought Billy Graham to this then new Angel Stadium, it was called. And I had met Billy because our quartet sang for him while he was just a preacher, and I was a student in the college. And when he was here with his campaign, he said, "Bob, you should see the truck, the TV truck." So he took me back to the TV truck, explained how they were taping this, and they would air it on television, and he used our building here, these grounds, for some classes. He said, "You ought to go on television, televise your church service." Well, I had been on television once or twice before. I had a program called Great Churches of the Golden West, which was sponsored by the National Council of Churches of Los Angeles. But that program died out because there was no quality control, there was no budget for good production, and the delivery of the message varied from preacher to preacher and church to church. So I'd been exposed to that. So Billy and I prayed about it, and we were led to believe that God wanted us to televise a church service, and that's how we started. Scared me stiff.
Had a lot of people been doing that?
No. There was no, aside from the Great Churches of the Golden West thing, no church had televised their own church service. There was no regularly televised church service here or in New York or in Chicago or anywhere in the United States, to my knowledge.
Now the church had grown a lot since those drive-in days.
Yes.
What was the status of the church at that point where you began televising the services?
Well, at that point, we had bought this ground, 10 acres, and we bought it for $6,000 an acre, which now seems cheap. And we had built our first church building, which was designed by Richard Neutra. We had that filled with people, about 1,400 people every week, at 2 services, which was at that time, the largest church in attendance in this county, and was the largest church attendance second to Marble Collegiate, where Norman Peale preached in New York City. So it was very successful. That's where we were. But to go on television meant we'd have to contract with a TV station to buy the time. And I was told that Channel 5, then owned by Gene Autry, would probably take it. And that was my introduction to Gene Autry. We went there, and we were able to buy an hour on Sunday mornings, I think 10 to 11, Channel 5. So I told Gene many times, we became very good friends, that if it wasn't for Gene Autry, there wouldn't be an hour of power. And but it would cost us $200 a week. No, I'm wrong. $4,000 a week, $200,000 a year. That's just the rent, the airtime. And it would cost us another $100,000 for the production, meaning the truck would come out with the cameras and the producer and all of that. So our whole budget to do it at the beginning was $400,000. Now that doesn't sound like much today, but that was like millions and millions today. And we had no reserve cash. We had no funds. But we prayed about it. I'll tell you, I believe in the God I talk about. I don't think you can find a priest, a rabbi, or anybody who believes in God more than I do. Because so many things have happened that are out of my control. And without it, none of this would be here. Anyway, we passed out cards on Sunday, and I said, we're thinking about a new goal and maybe televising our church services. How much more would you give each week if we did this? It's going to cost us something. We didn't tell them, but our goal was $200,000 in pledges, or 50% of the budget. And we passed those cards out. They added up to $186,000, $14,000 short. So I was relieved. This was God's guidance, I thought. Billy said, no, you have to wait for 2 days or 3 days, because some of them didn't drop it in the offering plate. They go home to talk about it. You were going to get cards in the mail on Monday and Tuesday, but you can't write another letter. You can't ask for another offering. And if they don't hit 200,000, it's God saying don't do it. If it does, it's God saying do it. By Tuesday, the mail boosted the number to over 200,000. That scared me. Because I honestly believed what we were doing. I honestly believed that we were sincere. I honestly believed this was God answering our prayer. That meant I honestly believed that God wanted me to do it. And if I didn't do it, drop dead, Schuller. Quit the ministry. From the age of 5, I was sincere. Now what do I do? 200,000. Yes, but that's only half of the budget. Well, we went on television.
Actually, let's stop there to change the tape.
Okay.